Ken Wells, Orleans County, Willoughby Lake area.
Phil Powell, Chinesburg, Route 116.
I love it. Nick, why don't you introduce then and take it over, and we were excited to hear, or well, I'm excited is not the right word. We're anxious to hear what your team has to say.
Well, thank you very, very much for having us, Mr. Chair. Appreciate it. Nice to see everybody. I'm Nick Sherman. I'm with Leonine Public Affairs and here with the Paving Association of Vermont. And I'll just go around and let them introduce themselves.
Hello, I'm Jay Perkins with Pike Industries. I'm Vice President of Commercial Sales.
From Caleb Ellenstein with Peckham Industries. I'm the head estimator for Peckham.
Mark Helpman, I'm with Engineers Construction Incorporated in Boston, Vermont, Senior Product Manager. Again, you're signing Peckham Industries, Account Executive.
Welcome. Thank you very much for coming.
Thanks for having us. So we did want to come in as we do every year and give you some industry updates, talk about how it's going. We also have a very specific ask this committee and the legislature this year. We are very concerned and have expressed concern over the past couple of years over the stability of the transportation fund and specifically being able to ensure that state matching funds are available to be used. I think we, just to give you a sort of snapshot of the last couple of years, and 2 fiscal years ago, at its height, the transportation program was 141 million. Now 2 years later, the proposed program is 102. And in that same time period, the miles that are proposed to be done the upcoming year have dropped by about 100. We always say that the state system needs 300 miles a year to be properly maintained, which is a lofty goal and frankly hard to hit. But in recent years, the program has been in the 2 to 225 range. So we are very concerned both that we will be able to, as a state, come up with the state match to be able to draw down funding just to keep things at the levels that they are proposed now. And that, the miles will be done to be able to maintain the network because it will be much more costly to repair things and rebuild them in future years than do maintenance now. So our ask is that this committee take a serious look at what you can do to maximize revenue. And we're not here to advocate for any one specific proposal, but there's been a lot of stuff that's been talked about, mileage-based user fee. There's been talk downstairs in the Senate committee about the vehicle purchase and use transfer to the education fund that has been going on a very long time. We certainly would advocate those transportation dollars as much as possible stay in the transportation fund to be able to address, the state matching fund projected gaps in future years. And there are other options like the TID bonding program, which is, specific to projects that generally aren't paving, that could be broadened to allow for stuff like paving projects to be done. So there are various options out there, and there are more ideas than that floating around, I'm sure. Regardless of what it is, we are concerned that there's a real risk and that this downward trend in miles paved will continue. There certainly are challenges with inflation, and these guys can talk about how they're seeing that impact their industry. The dollars aren't going as far as they used to, and that does make it that is a huge challenge. But we need to figure out a way to stabilize the fund and ensure that we're maintaining the system in a way that isn't going to cost exponentially more down the line. On the project side, you know, paving projects are very different. The treatments that they use and that's sort of what goes into a project. And I'll let these guys speak to the differences between treatments and projects. But, you know, you've certainly always advocated, and this year I think is more important than ever, that there be focus on within the program, prioritizing projects and creating a program in the years going forward that, you know, gets the state the best bang for its buck. There are lower cost projects that you can get more miles out of less money. And that is a way you can, you know, increase miles in the program. So we think it's important to look at that. We have a great working relationship with the Agency of Transportation. We communicate a lot. These are what we're advocating for here today. We speak to them about frequently, and we know they're taking it seriously, and we appreciate that very much. It does this year feel like we're really reaching a point where, given the projections in the out years, something has to be done. So that's our ask. We can happy to answer questions or go into sort of updates generally about how the industry works, how the last year went, whatever is helpful to the committee.
Representative Rose?
With the current budget, how many miles are you expected to pay this year?
I think the current budget is in the 125 range.
And how many miles will you be able to do? You said 300 would be perfect. That's a high number.
Yeah.
How many do you expect to put in with the budget that you have?
Well, the proposed budget for this year would do 125 miles.
Okay.
So that's what's proposed this year.
Yeah.
Representative Couch?
Yeah, thanks for coming in, and I appreciate the fact that the first topic you bring up is the declining funds appropriated to transportation and the risk of not being able to lock up federal funds. So I think this committee recognizes that as a threat. But I think I might have an ask for you, your group too. A couple of years ago, we raised some fees for motor vehicle to try to close that gap. Got our hats handed to us. Yet that is a critical part of this year's budget. So no matter what we might consider or look for in the future for increasing transportation funds, there'll be groups, rightfully so, who will not like that for a number of reasons. But for the greater good and the greater ability of our Agency of Transportation to maintain the infrastructure we have, we need those funds. So the ask would go back to continue that discussion and raise the fact that while it's a difficult decision to do that, it can be critical to accomplish the goals we're all trying to do.
Yeah,
Go ahead, please respond first. And then we'll go
I
over.
appreciate that, and our group has been, supportive in the past when the tough discussions needed to happen to increase revenue into the program. When the state raised the gas tax 10 years ago, we were supportive of that. Now, not sure that's the place to look now, because that's the declining revenue.
Yes.
But just to your point, we appreciate that. In order to do this, it's going to come along with some difficulty and some pain. Get that.
Thank you.
Representative Burke?
And I just to follow up on that, asking you to help discuss this with the administration as well. Reluctance to raise
Yep,
these taxes.
appreciate that. Like I said, we have a strong relationship with the administration. they hear from us a lot on these issues. And we will continue to talk to them for sure.
So I'm not, oh.
Just a question, do you all, are you doing work solely in Vermont? Are you working in other states as well? And are you seeing similar situations in other states and?
Hmm.
And is there anything to learn from other states that we could benefit from?
I'm gonna turn it over to the
I'm
industry
Jay
folks.
Perkins
to
with
answer
Pike
that.
Industries. We work in Maine, New Hampshire, and Vermont. Vermont being the smallest piece of the pie where we work. We have 7 asphalt plants, 4 quarries that service the state of Vermont, and 210 employees that live in Vermont. We have about 750 total employees. But to answer your question specifically, what other states are doing, it's probably nothing you want to hear here, but both Maine and New Hampshire have tolling on certain highways, so they can get some additional revenue, and those tolls will change with inflation and increase. They've also used, I think we do it too with our ferries here, or across Lake Champlain to get credits, and so those states have other ways of getting credits as well. This problem that we're facing, many other states are facing it. It didn't happen overnight. It actually happened about 3.5 years ago when the infrastructure bill passed. The federal government increased the formula funding by about 45% on average. Vermont got, I think, about 48% additional formula funds, which requires 45 or 48% additional match money to go with it. And every state's challenged with it. Some states have done things. Vermont did the fees, which is probably a portion of what we need to be. But I think the state has done a great job in transferring funds back and forth between general fund and transportation and different things to keep things going up to this point. But those opportunities are shrinking. And the outlook, which was projected to happen before now, the outlook is like deficits of $40 million, $30 to $40 million of match money. And that's real money and a real problem. I would like to talk a little bit about the 300 miles. That is something that we've been talking about for a number of years, and it's not self-serving. I think we've been talking about with AOT, and they have admitted they'd like to get there. And where that number comes from is there are approximately 3,200 two-lane equivalent miles maintained by the paved miles, maintained by the state. So if you take and cut that, say you're on a 10-year cycle, that is 300 miles a year to keep that cycle going. 10 years, there are some pavement treatments we do that last longer than 10 years, and there are some that we don't. But that number came from, at the time, the balance of a preventive maintenance treatment and something more gutty and in depth that costs more would come out to about a 10-year cycle. And, a 123-mile program is very concerning to me because we'll make it through this year with a 123-mile program if that's what we got to do. But we're going to pay for it down the road because you're not going to be able to make that up. You might be able to increase miles, but you won't be able to make up for what you didn't do this year. And as we all know, inflation, whether it's 3% or 10%, is here. And it's just going to cost more to do the work if you kick the can down the road for that.
If I could ask, so if that drop 148 million to 102 million, it's $48 million less spent on paving for your organizations or companies and whatnot. You are operating Maine, New Hampshire. If you would have to make some reaction to your assets, all the kind of equipment it takes to run huge projects like that. How do you respond and plan with that? That's a 40% drop in revenue for your business. How do you respond in terms of your planning out your projects and your people and where you're going to put your assets, put your investments and whatnot? And if I understand what you would have to do in moving other places or finding other projects, when you talk about catching up, how easy is it that they're going to come back? If we do 100 miles this year and we only do 100 miles next year, talking about a significant drop in activity, workers, those asphalt plant, what happens? What happens to those people? Where do you use them? Do you not use them? How do you respond to a 40% drop in potential revenues to the industry or to the pavers in Vermont?
Well, first off, and I'll answer your question, but first off, we're more concerned about the miles than we are the dollars. Okay. So there has been a significant drop in miles, so we are very concerned. Our initial focus will be to keep our people busy. So there's a benefit to working in multiple states. We work in 3 states. Maine is looking at having a bigger year this year than they had last year. So our first thought is to shift some of the human resources over to Maine, in part to keep them busy and in part to keep our volumes consistent, company volumes overall. But the longer term impacts that is concerning is the reinvestment in our infrastructure other than human resources in this state. If the workload falls off, then the buying new pavers, buying new trucks, upgrading the crushers and the pavers will probably shrink 40% as well. So when it's time to go back to work in Vermont, we may not be prepared to jump right back into it as quickly as you would initially think. So that would be
And the
Problem.
cost associated. Be more cost.
So this equipment's not, the equipment's not cheap and it just can't sit there. That's my concern of what I'm getting at is we fall back much further. People have to be resourceful and run your businesses. Are you going to be there if we're able to turn the faucet back on? How long is it going to take to, or how hard is it going to be to trust to get it back to that level as I guess is where I was sort of headed in that direction. What if you're not a company that paves in 3 states? What do the members do that don't?
So
Please.
Mark Holiday, ECI, or Engineers Construction Incorporated, we work primarily in Vermont. We do have a paving crew. And where we would see the difference is like pipe industries, so we buy hot mix from every day during the season. They're gonna start doing some of the work that we normally do. We don't do a lot of state paving, we do maybe 1 project a year. But all of a sudden, they're doing the town work that we do, right? So now we're squeezed and we gotta find different avenues, and that might be, everybody likes to work close to home, right? Nobody wants to travel. It might be extending our borders, losing people because now they're working out of town when they're used to working at home. It's definitely a dog eat dog world out there. So we'd advocate for more paving dollars, not necessarily because we're gonna do them, but it leaves the work we do more available to us.
Interesting.
Another thing I would say about risks to the paving program in particular associated with whether or not the state can come up with matching funds is the paving program is more susceptible to fluctuation in state funds because other types of projects will use 100% federal or they'll be funded through the TID fund or other sources that aren't affected so much by state funds. So the governor's proposed to eliminate the JTOG transfer from the transportation fund and general funds, about $20 million. I believe V-Trans handed out a document to this committee that showed, what would happen if that transfer, if that change wasn't made. And it's almost all paving because the state funds, that's what it affects. So I think for this industry in particular, certainly state matching funds are important to all sectors within transportation, but paving is particularly concerned about the impact.
Where else do we want to go? Does anybody have any questions or comments? And certainly you made a lot of effort to be here. I'd like to hear anything that you might have to say.
I think, I appreciate everybody having us here, to start with. A lot of it's just consistency, you know, on our side, what we're looking for and encourage you guys to, you know, look at alternative paving options, you know, like, some of the cold in place recycling, some of the alternative, ways to do it. Kind of simplify some of the paving projects, maybe more paving, less of the sidewalks and the added, that gets, quite expensive. So like a lot of smaller projects will reduce the cost if they're primarily just paving. They don't include a lot of the additionals. You can get more money per buck.
Please,
And to his point, the work type or the treatment type that is proposed makes a big difference. I said earlier, I'm not so caught up in the amount of money as I am about the amount of miles that we do every year, so we can maintain a steady, consistent program. For example, in this year's proposed paving list for this summer, at the bottom of the list that the state handed out is some treatments called FPAIDs. It's basically you go in and mill and trim and overlay, and there might be a little bit of ditching, a little bit of guardrail repair, but no guardrail replacement, shoulder gravel striping. And that there's 40 miles proposed, which represent 1/3 of the entire paving program. However, the amount of money that has been programmed for those jobs only represents 12% of the money. So you're getting more miles for a smaller piece of the money pot. Compare that to the Class 1 highways. Now, I know there's people from Rutland City here, but there's a Rutland City job, a Ludlow job, and a Brattleboro job in there, okay? When you look at that 8.9 miles and add up what's been programmed for that type of work, it's $3.6 million a mile. Okay, so, and I'm not proposing cutting, shifting, or anything like that, but when we put together a program, we have to keep it in mind that if we did one less mile of those Class 1 highways, that would allow you to do 10 more miles of FPAID.
And along that, just to continue that thought, what is the difference? Why are those miles so expensive? What goes into those miles that make them so expensive?
Well, multiple lanes,
Uh-huh,
traffic lights,
uh-huh.
probably some sidewalks, some tip downs. I mean, they're all.
And what is the
good,
tip down
for the sidewalks come down to meet the edge of the,
for accessibility?
yes.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, striping, signage, probably much more signage intensive than, a mile of country road.
Those are conversations you have with the agency on a regular basis, I assume, or not? Does that dialogue happen?
Oh, yeah.
Agency, because we don't get to a project level basis, that's the agency means at a project level. So I'm not sure how I can help with that piece or not, or maybe you can help me understand what our role might be in that, or if it's an issue of awareness, I certainly appreciate it.
Well, your role is more money, so you can do both.
Yeah.
I can tell you, I couldn't agree more, but not everybody wants to listen to me across the building. We're not as always well received as I walk through the building as I might like.
We're certainly not here to
anonymity.
we're not here to advocate that the legislature start designing projects or dictating to the agency how to do it. This is informational, both to say, we're concerned about the trend and the reduction in miles, so let's figure out how we can do more with less, frankly. And this is a conversation we have with the agent, and I think they totally get it, frankly. I think they're working to build the best program they have with, what they got. So we're not asking you to do anything about that, but we do want you to understand that if you drop, $30-40 million in the overall appropriation for the program, it doesn't mean that there needs to be a, automatic drop in the miles in, proportion.
Let me clarify it just a little bit. The FPAIDs have been programmed to cost about $375,000 a mile. Okay, so for every $1 million that got added to the paving program, you could do an additional close to 3 miles of paving. Versus you added $1 million to the class one highway system, you'd only get third of a mile, quarter of a mile.
There's also a difference. I mean, you were speaking to add-ons to projects. I think there are different types of depth and treatment that you can do, like a reclaim. Like the difference between a reclaim and a district leveling project. One is the reclaim is more rebuilding the road, which takes more money, more time, more resources, whereas the leveling is more of an overlay. And obviously, the longer you go without leveling, the more likely you're going to need reclaim. So, gotta get that right.
Representative Key?
Let me see if I can ask the question to make sense. I'm just thinking of the federal regulations that you're required to, or we are required to go along. How much does that add to a job, or is there any way to get, just explain that concept, that what's going on there?
Well, I want to get these numbers wrong because I didn't. If they were just doing district leveling, you would probably be able to pave a mile of road with no federal oversight, basic safety upgrades, $150,000 a mile. Okay. There is federal money involved in these FPAs, but it's very basic, what you need to do for additional requirements. Federal money brings Davis-Bacon wages, drivers and operators, which in some cases, the difference between what the prevailing wage at a particular company has versus what the Davis-Bacon wages are. So there would be some additional costs there. And so I'm not going to say that federal money doubles the cost of a job, but it's close.
So is following up on that, then would it ever be, can it ever be reasonable to say we don't want to match?
I don't know if I'd say that, but we operate in New Hampshire and in Maine, and each one of those states has a paving program that does not involve federal funds, and they go out to just get miles.
Interesting. Thank you.
It is somewhat more complex here too, though, because we rely so heavily on the federal dollars, as other states have tolls and stuff like that, that they can generate their own revenue. So we, to be clear, you know, it's really important that these gaps in the state match that are projected in the out years are addressed. Need to do that, and some of that may mean taking away dollars from a district leveling project, which is 100% state money. At the same time, let's be as savvy as we can about designing a program that maximizes the miles with the money that we have. It's not an easy balancing act.
I do have a couple questions. I didn't want to dominate. Okay. So, two questions. When you talk about a simple paving versus that more complex rebuilding, I mean, isn't that short term? Like, if we're just paving over something to kind of save money and get more miles, we're going to have to pay the piper at some point, right? I mean, as you said, like, if you're just kind of doing a light, shorter version of paving, at some point, you're going to have to do a full rebuild, which is going to be pretty costly. I mean, so is there a benefit to doing?
Yes, so the example I use down in Senate Kansas, think about your house and your roof, right? Every 20 years, you should replace your roof. If you're not replacing in 20 years, then you're getting into sheetrock and electrical and framing. And so to answer your question is, the more you get out there and do these preventative, like especially on the interstate where your subbase is good, you're saving yourself. If you don't get on those roads, then you're going to be in the more expensive fixes, right? Some of the roads, I mean, it's subbase driven, right? You've all driven on those less traveled roads that have bad subbase. It's already there, so the expensive fix, you're right, you're just buying time with a paving job. But again, it comes down to treating miles, as long as you're treating. Like Jay's numbers, 300 miles per year, you're staving off the more expensive repairs down the road.
My second question is, as you talk about simpler projects, less expensive versus a project with sidewalks. I can't remember the term you used for the accessibility. Is there, I mean, why those are important is as we think about paving the road, use of roads, if pedestrians and bikes can be traveling, then that's less people driving their cars on the roads, which save the roads. So is there an alternative material that is less expensive than asphalt that could be used for sidewalks and bike lanes? A gravel composite, just so that we don't lose a great opportunity to make a nice sidewalk. But maybe there's a way to do it in a more cost-saving manner to at least claim the sidewalk space, but not do an expensive pave.
There are options and alternative treatments were mentioned earlier, but the impact it has would be what we're looking for, would be a positive impact, but it may not be the size of what we would want to get out of it or need to get out of it to solve the problem that's in front of us right now.
Right.
And I was just gonna say, we're certainly, we're not here to advocate against those, because those are important to your point. We're simply saying when you're looking at the overall program, maybe it's not those add-ons, but maybe it's a district level program that you can get 10, a reclaim program that you can get 10 level programs if you did that instead.
Yeah, one, I guess it's a comment or a question. A couple times, tolls have been brought up and, we see them in Maine, certainly in New Hampshire, as a source of revenue. But we've been told, and I assume you'll agree, we can't have tolls in Vermont. And
You're correct.
yeah, okay.
Sorry.
So I think it's important that when you do bring up tolls, you make it really clear to everyone
Yeah.
that it's not an option in Vermont. I was just at an event 2 nights ago when, a whole bunch of people came over and said, well, why don't you just do tolls? And I had to go and say, we can't. So I think it's important that people understand that that's not an option. And so the other options, here are, and so that's not an option. Then we're forced to look at other revenue raising opportunities or ideas. The second thing is this last year we passed a test program for automatic traffic enforcement for work zones. Are you aware of that? That's using cameras to enforce speeding. It was based on primarily in Connecticut, their success at reducing speeding. And is that, are you also as concerned as others we heard about safety, work zone safety, and the few tools that we have to help that? And so this test program that's coming this next year, we're anxious to see if that's had a benefit. So I don't know if you have a comment on that. Looking forward to it or not aware of it.
Can you guys use that on the projects this year?
I'm unaware of it. I have seen where they use I'm sure you've seen them, you see them in towns where they have the radar and it tells you how fast you're going versus the speed limit. I haven't heard about any
So this is
fines
coming.
associated with that.
This is coming. There's going to be some, it's really a test program. Go ahead.
Yeah, last year, New York State adopted that, and we didn't have any on our jobs per se, but I know some of our customers had that. And they mail you a ticket. Lots of times it's the problem with it they're finding is the picture's not good enough to give the ticket, like if somebody else is driving somebody else's registered car. There's been a lot of complaints with that, but it is a good alternative way to, safety's number one in our industry, you know, to protect our site, you know, the package and all the employees with it. Is definitely number one, so it would be very interesting to see a pilot program like that and, you know, how that.
Yeah.
add to the office.
Yeah, I'd encourage you to look at, it should be this year, and it's only on the state, on the federal highways, and it's gonna be, I think, maybe 10 zones. It's really a test program. But based on testimony we had and reports we've had from other states, particularly this one in Connecticut, which it was modeled after, they saw significant reductions in speed, not only where it's obvious they have cameras, but you have to say you have them, in other zones too, because now people are starting to. So it.
We're
could be
going
feedback,
to
yeah.
get a update on the program in the middle of March. Is on our long-term calendar planning. They're going to be in to update us on that. So I know you're in the building regularly, so when it comes into March, you'll catch that on our agenda. Representative Lally is next, and then Representative Hayes.
Yeah, I just wanted to speak to the costs of, that are imposed by the class one projects. And I think some of the costs that are involved in that are driven by the standards that you have to build them to. The state is working on developing new Vermont state standards, and I think this is a wonderful opportunity to for us to figure out how to make upgrades to make our communities more walkable and bikeable, but also to do so affordably. And I'm hoping that we will see leaner, flexible, context-based standards that move away from costly things like curb and gutter, so that, we can do things along the lines of, what Representative White was saying, which is, initially pave in gravel, which is, something that can easily be improved upon later. And hopefully, under the community's own steam and with local dollars too. So this is just one of the many indicators of how we need to try and, defederalize as many of our dollars as we can. So thank you for this. It's very, very illuminating.
Representative Case?
Why can't we charge tolls?
Because without going too far into it, basically, we accepted 100% of, correct me if I'm wrong, we expected 100% of the federal money to build the interstate. And with that came a contingency that said it would always be open road spot. So I guess in some ways you might be able to put a toll on some side, or I don't know, but you cannot put it on the interstate. Is it?
We need an act of Congress.
You need an act of Congress to change the law that puts it on the interstate, because we took that money back in 1950s and 60s to build the interstate. And we took it for free, but it's not free. There's conditions, and that's one of them. Is my simplest understanding of that. And the only way to get around that is a new act of Congress to relieve us of that, or to pay back all of that money.
Neither of which is going to happen.
Neither of which is going to happen, so we can't have tolls. I hope that answers you.
That's what it does.
Excuse me.
Representative Keith?
So I get it that you can't put them on interstates. Could you put it on Route 7 in Shelburne? Toll?
Well, we're not going to go down too far this.
No, I get it.
right now, but I want to make a quick comment on that.
Yeah, just quickly, I used to work at AOT and so.
We'll put it in Rutland is what you're.
If you get a toll road, you lose all federal. They aren't gonna participate at all.
Okay, that's
That's
Going forward.
how you pay for it yourself, but that's not how.
right. No, okay, that was just an add-on question. I just, interstate, yeah, but why not Route 103 or 78 or?
Want this chair?
So it's roads. So is that road specific? Is like New Hampshire? Because they have a toll road, does that cover the whole state, all their roads?
They have a.
Right.
No, it's got to do with the original state road and how it was paid for in terms of where it is, even though it appears to be on the interstate, it's technically all right on the New Hampshire route number. They are not on, anyway. We're not gonna go to, we can talk about that more after. We can even get you an expert to tell us why, but I can't do that. What the bigger, for this part, but for this, if the goal is 300 and you take 3 years, 300, 600, 900 to try to keep up, we don't usually make that, but we were hitting over 200. Let's say we did 200 last year, you drop to 100. And if we go 100 again, now you're 500 behind. Well, if you're 500 behind in 3 years, that's over 2.5 years behind in just 3 years. You're never coming back from that, is what I hear you. That's what I would say is the most important thing about the testimony. Now, regardless of how much that costs, is what I hear you saying, regardless of how much that costs and what we would have to do to respond to that, whether the money was or wasn't there, that's really the issue, that you can fall 2.5 years behind in less than 3 years. And now you're never coming back from that in terms of the condition of those roads, if we actually need to pave them every 10 years. Is that, I got somebody's attention. Here we go.
Yeah, like that's really what the main thing is we're starting to dig a deeper and deeper hole. Or look, the forecasting is a deeper and deeper hole. And what we talked about a little bit downstairs was the upcomings of emergency jobs because of that, of you're spending now $1 million to do a small patch to fix a small roadway or a small area of a roadway because it wasn't done earlier, or it got pushed down the line, or whatever the reason was, and you're spending more money to kind of just fix it and make it passable for the winter or for a short period of time, and then redoing the whole road anyway, a year or 2 years down the road. Jay brought up the story downstairs, and I can share another one. So on Route 22A and from Fairhaven to Orwell, in late October-ish, a couple of years ago, there was a job put out to do fill the wheel ruts in the roadway. So because cars were actually getting taken off the roadway, and there were a couple of fatalities. So it was under emergency job that was around $1 million to rut fill the 20 miles or so of the road. The following year, we did the mill and fill on the roadway, and basically ripped up all the new asphalt we had just put down to do the rut fill. So it was
public confidence.
$1 million to get a winner out of it, basically. And our kind of fear, what we see coming, is with the deeper and deeper hole, that may be more and more of these small $1 million or so emergency repairs, and the less lane miles you do, the more and more these are going to come up that just prohibit more lane miles, basically. And you get to a point where you're just doing emergency jobs kind of thing to make the roads passable.
Well, residents of Franklin County started to feel that way about the interstate up there, with cars off almost every single rainstorm. But is there anything else you'd like to, thank you for the input. Is there anything else you'd like to, any of your group would like to sum up in terms of, or anything else you want to bring it to close? We really appreciate you.
Yeah, thanks for having us. If there's nothing else specific, I just would reiterate a request is, okay, please take this seriously. Please, let's work together to look for a way to stabilize this fund. So we have the resources we need going forward. In addition to that, I don't think this is an act of this committee or the legislature, but let's look at how to get more miles out of less money within the program. That's important. And please support the elimination of the JTOP transfer that the governor's proposed. If that doesn't go through, that's mostly paving projects, and we go down from that 125 that's proposed at this point. So that's important.
Well, I think that we can say the committee does recognize that, and we will certainly continue our work on that piece. And to all of your members and your companies, we appreciate the service that you give to Vermont, and to all the employees that you have in Vermont and all the projects. And we appreciate your partnership with the agency and the work to continue moving forward. So thank you for coming in. I'm glad we're able to do the Senate and the House on the same day. I know it's hard to be away from your.
Thank you for accommodating.
Be here to advocate, and it's important to us. And we recognize the hole that leaves behind back there. Thank you very much. We appreciate
Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.
And thanks for putting it together.
Yeah. Thanks for accommodating us with the Senate. That made it a lot easier.
And our apologies to candidates. Our next guest, for our next witness for holding up this little bit.
Carrie told me you guys were running late. I thought I might as well sit in here rather than sit downstairs.
All right. We're happy to have you anytime that you're available.
So excited to go through this black book.
I know, I was a little surprised. I'm like, we're about to get in the weeds, but that's okay. It is a specialty of mine, so.
Sounds fair, the same reason. The sort of. Ways. What that's very. I mean, I'm gonna use to right there before in that. Then they got another realistic. Even.
Sometimes people play together. It's okay. We're still live, so those whispers are probably out there. We're moving subjects a little bit. We are very lucky to have agency's Chief Financial Officer with us today. Candace, welcome. And this is in response to member feedback and then a few other, I don't know how many other pieces we're going to do besides the Black Book, but this was member feedback from a while ago. They wanted some more help in understanding the budget and the pieces. So we're going to turn it over to you and thank you for coming back into committee. And I'm pretty sure it's wide open for questions here.
Okay, thank you. Candace Almquist, Chief Financial Officer. Thank you for inviting me. There's a lot in the Black Book. We're scheduled for an hour, so I'm happy to start getting in the weeds and then folks can interrupt me. If you don't interrupt me, I'll probably talk for like 20 minutes of the hour and then questions after, of course, but there's a lot here. Or maybe we don't have an hour yet because we started late. It's fine.
We'll get to a spot where people will know whether they need to track down more information or not,
Right.
or more, but we haven't dug into the Black Book in the years that I've been here, so I'm kind of interested to, I've been in it myself, but anyway.
All right.
Let's go.
All right, so each year, the administration, that's the Agency of Administration, receives instruction from the chairs of House Appropriation and Senate Appropriations on what we need to submit when we're presenting our budget to the legislature, that upcoming session. So every year, this year included, that letter says you need to provide Vantage reports. Vantage is the budget system that the administration uses to compile the budget. So the Black Book is the agency's response to that portion of the letter that says provide Vantage reports. We'll go through what each one of the reports is within the Black Book. But that's why the Black Book exists. This is the White Book is online, but the Black Book for the agency is not online. The Black Book at a whole state of Vermont level is always published online by the Department of Finance and Management. But if the committee were ever interested in us making the Black Book for AOT specifically online rather than printing it out like hard copy each year, would be like open to that conversation, obviously, for like environmental reduction. I will start with the first page. So table of contents. You'll see that some of these are divisions and some of them are programs like town highway structures or town highway bridges. The reason that the Black Book is set up this way is because these sections correspond to sections in the budget bill. So I have a nice little handy budget bill here. This is what we go with every year on how appropriations look. Sorry, let me flip to the transportation section. So for example, our first transportation section in the appropriations bill itself is section B900, Transportation Finance and Administration. So you'll see that corresponds to the first item here, Finance and Administration. So you'll be able to match items here to the B900 sections. And if you're interested right now, I was noting when I was preparing to do this dive through that perhaps next year we will have the section numbers next to each one of these rows so that you can crosswalk, but like I'm happy to tell you what those numbers are now if you wanna.
I know you did that in the white book and well, I don't know if you were here yet, but they started putting the numbers on their presentations.
Yeah,
Match the numbers in the white book. It got much clearer for us rookies.
very good, very good.
I do like also the idea that we can have it online, whether that would be acceptable to, I don't know who makes that decision, but to make it acceptable, then it would be workable for everybody. It might be, might be a good idea, but it's fast and easy. But anyway, we'll get to that.
Great. A lot of binders.
Yeah. It's helpful to have this book.
The white book in hard copy. Yeah.
Did you say that this is online under Department of Finance
And management. Yeah. If you go to the Department of Finance and Management site, they have for the entire state of Vermont, and they have different folders by agency. So there is a transportation folder. It's just a lot of clicking to get there. It's not all like nicely packaged like this. All right. Moving on beyond the table of contents. So again, every time you get to a section, it's going to start with a number that starts with 810. That is the transportation identifier, but the full number is the DEPT ID. If you're ever talking to myself or maybe Logan about a specific section, we could also know what you're talking about based on this number, which is called DEPT ID, departmental ID. So here we have finance and administration, and the first report that we see is the roll-up. That's going to give us categories of account codes. And within those categories, they are organized by 3 major objects. The major objects are detailed in the budget bill as well. So if you go back to the budget bill, you'll see personal services, operating expenses, and grants for any section that has all 3 of those. If there's a section that only has 1 of the 3 or 2 of the 3, then it'll leave 1 off. But here you could see for finance and administration, we have personal services, we have operating, and then when we flip to the next page, we have grants as well. So this is a DEPT ID that has all 3 of the major objects. And within the major objects, you could see the roll-up categories. These numbers are all funds. For finance and administration, if we flip to the next page, so that would be, says page 2 of 2 on the bottom. You can see that finance and administration has mostly transportation funds, but a small amount of federal funds. So for the 26 GovRec budget, I'm looking at a column that's like 3 over from the right. It says 25.15 transportation fund and 1.39 of federal funds. So when you're reviewing all the numbers above in the 3 major objects, you have to remember that that's a combination of both transportation funds and federal funds. And if you ever had a question about like for a specific roll-up category, what's the split between TF and federal or whatever other type of fund you're looking at for that DEPT ID, we can get you that information. You're just not going to see that level of breakout on the Vantage reports that are submitted to the legislature. But Logan, for instance, has reached out to me on a couple of account codes and I've given him the split.
Yes, can you just confirm you're on page 2 of 12 or 2?
2 of 2 of the roll-up. It's labeled page 2 on the right.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
And then the columns here for this roll-up report, we have prior year actuals 2024. This would match the ACFR that's published by Financial Operations each year. Then we have the 25 as passed budget. That's what we did last session. And we have the 25 BAA GovRec. If we were proposing a BAA, you would see that here. That's different than as passed, I mean. And then the 26 GovRec, the difference between 26 and the as passed, and then the percent change between the 26 and as passed. And those columns also feed into the next report. So that's the roll up. The next report is going to look very similar to, any questions on the roll-up before I move on?
Looking up to see if there were, but there we go.
The detail is very similar to the roll-up, but hence its name, it has a little bit more detail. Here, instead of seeing the categories by major object, now we see the accounts that feed into the categories. So like as before, when we saw salary and wages, now we can see the individual account codes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 account codes that make up salaries and wages. So this is the account codes are given to us by financial operations. It's part of the statewide chart of accounts used in our vision system. We don't really have an opportunity right now currently to change the chart of accounts. We are boxed in for our current system, but we do have the Workday ERP transition happening, and that's very active. So as a part of that, every agency in the state is looking at the chart of accounts and seeing, would there be anything that we could propose to be changed that change that could fit our operations better. But these are pretty standard. Almost everything on the first page here is driven by what's called the salary and benefits forecasting system. That's a module within Vantage that basically takes all of the positions straight out of VTHR, which is our human resources system, and projects what the salary would cost for that year's recommended budget. So we have the ability to go into the system and say, for the recommended budget, we'd like to propose changing this position to part-time, or we'd like to propose double filling this position. We have the ability to make changes to the inputs, but not how the forecast is driven, because that's set by finance and management and the collective bargaining agreement. Moving through some of these account codes, some of these numbers are given to us, specifically the internal service fund and SLA amounts. Those are ones that I highlighted last week when I was in talking about FY26 needs that we knew about. Like before we even started the budget process in August, we knew that we were going to have a 3 to 4% increase on our internal service fund charges and SLA amount from ADS. So those are specific account codes in this list. Again, I could give them to you, but they're not all contained within one category. They're spread out amongst everything we're looking at here. I'm going to keep flipping. So we get to call it. I have little more to say, the detail report. So I'm ready to go into the next report, which is called the budget position summary on page 15, unless there are questions.
I think I am working up to a question. If I follow the codes codes that come all the way through, then the description on the left and the next to the code.
Yes.
If I said, Candace, I want to know the code, there's a diesel fuel code. You can go in and kind of just, for all of the agency of transportation, tell me the $4 million you spent on diesel this year, or the.
I could.
I mean, how is that? Can you search it by code in one?
I could. It's not presented to the legislature that way.
I'm not saying it should. I'm just saying I saw one of the pieces. I was skipping ahead, looking at different things. And, like Central Garage spent $2 million on diesel. And I'm like, boy, if you added everybody up, it might be interesting. And I'm not looking to get you off track and too many early questions, but you could actually, it will pull all the departments without a lot of work, or is it hard work?
Right. I was prepared for anything today. So right now on my computer, I have an extract of our whole agency by account code and fund code. So if you wanted me to do something on the fly, I could.
Well, I'm not trying to get you that far on the spot, but I was thinking about you know what the totals are of all these different codes if you want to.
Yeah.
And you're looking at, and you can see if there's spikes or not in different areas or unexpected, but some of those, I'm ranking them by your top 10. Obviously, the wages are the by far, but your top biggest expenses throughout the whole agency, you can see them, you see them on a summary.
Yeah,
right?
yes.
In terms of what you're, and it's not cumbersome to do that, you know, you wonder sometimes about state computers, how hard is it for you to look at your bigger picture? How is it, how cumbersome is it? Are some of those questions available if I pop them over?
It's available and, I mean, I'm here right now. I think if I got that question from Logan, I probably could respond within 24 hours, just based on like other, if I had any other priorities going on.
I don't wanna make work, so that's kind of my, there's something, if I'm looking for things that are just like a minute to literally pop them in, then I might wanna know them, but if I'm asking questions that are taking hours of work, I don't necessarily wanna do that, that's what I'm kind of. If they're simple, sometimes I wanna, just for info and background, I may wanna know, but I don't wanna create
I think
any more work, you know, tons of work if it's laborious to get them out of there.
the exercise itself probably takes 20 minutes.
Representative, thank you.
Yeah, just, I guess curiosity. So some of the descriptions and codes, back looking to those first 12 pages, some of them have like just zero right across.
Right.
So, is it because that code at some point had value and there it is? Or like all the codes aren't here because there's a lot of them, right?
Right.
How do you know which codes to put under the different, like I'm looking just, for example, at travel. There were no delinquent advances, but I'm like so kind of curious why that code is there.
It's a good question, Representative, and I know the answer. It is because sometime in the past 13 years, we had either expenses or a budgeted amount in that.
Okay, so sometimes you might have to add a code.
Yes.
Or are new codes created occasionally?
New codes are created by FinOps. And then if we never had expenses to that code or budgeted to it, we would go in and add it in the Vantage system so that we could use it. Yeah. Good questions. You guys are speaking my language right now. All right, the budget position summary report, again, by depth ID. So this is going to give you a picture of the positions within that depth ID. Right now, we're talking about finance and administration. It'll give you the FTE, the count, the gross salary, again, given to us from that forecasting system. The state benefits are going to be almost everything we know as benefit. Sorry, Trey.
That one got me.
I was just sort of joking if we knew your title, we could look you up.
You could. And you do know my title. My title is, public record and the salary of everyone is public record.
I think that's a important concept.
Yeah.
I mean, it has positives and negatives, obviously.
The only benefits by position in the federally mandated column are going to be Medicare and Social Security, but everything else that we know of benefits like health, retirement, dental, et cetera, that all is falling in the state benefits column. You get the total by position. So the reason this is public record is because all of the employee names have, been stripped out. Yeah. Oh, and I will say that you'll see here for each one of the divisions, that we budget all of our positions within the position summary report to transportation fund. We obviously know that we have positions that code some of their time to projects that get federal reimbursement. So if you look on the detail report, we have an account code called reimbursements to AOT. And so we budget a negative amount then and a positive amount to federal to make up the fact that, our positions are able to code some of their time to federal. So after the position summary report, we have the federal receipts inventory report. I'm looking at page 21. This is for any DEP ID that has a federal fund code. That could be FTA, FAA, FHWA, any of our federal partners. We are going to give you the CFDA, otherwise known as the Assistance Listing Number, ALN. The federal entity for which the dollars are from, and then a short description of what it's for with the amount. I recognize we're not getting a lot of information from FNA here on the FHWA one, but there are other divisions that go into a little bit more detail on the federal dollar side. And then if we flip the page to page 22, we have another inventory report that's very similar for grants. So again, for any DEP ID that has an amount in the grants major object, we're gonna get a description of what the grant is for and the amount. So here in finance and administration, they really only have one grant program, but if they had multiple, you'd see multiple lines and the amounts per program.
But just to clarify, these are reimbursable to V-Trans? Like
For
this?
these grants,
Yes.
they're not necessarily federal grants. They're just grants that we give to other entities.
Okay.
And we do have a third inventory, but finance and administration doesn't have this inventory in it. So we're gonna have to flip to page 88 to find the first instance of it. Give everyone a second. On page 88, we have our third inventory report, which is interdepartmental transfers. And this is giving us an idea for every division or DEP ID that has an amount associated with the interdepartmental fund code. Who are we expecting money from, for what purpose, and then the amount. So here we have program development or highways. We expect an amount from public safety for a particular project, and the amount, we expect an amount from ACCD related to the governor's mobile home infill program and the amount. And then we do expect state match for permanent work for flood related projects. And this is the amount of money that we expect to come from AOA, from one-time DEP IDs, general fund DEP IDs they have to support state match for the emergency flood work. And the last thing I wanted to say is that it's always useful to have it broken down by DEP ID, but we also have agency-wide summaries starting on page 281. So if you just wanted to know on the whole, agency-wide, and this actually might get to your question, Chair Walker.
Oh, wow.
Hey, I don't even have to do any fancy calculations on my computer. We could just find the detail report for the AOT wide.
If you knew that code, you could find it.
I know. So you were talking about fuel. Cost of gasoline and diesel. I think it's page 290. You could see.
Just quicker than mine. So you probably just 290. Cost of diesel and, okay, so most of it is spent in the, I guess thought I was in central garage. I thought it was, this is agency wide. Page 290 is agency wide.
Yes, and it could be that central garage is charging a different account code. We have a lot of account codes that look similar to each other.
Still $2 million in 2024. 2 million, is that what we're saying? $2 million in diesel?
Yes.
$818,000 in gas. It makes you kind of start wondering, I wonder what a bank service charge is.
Or is there a line for coffee and donuts?
Yeah. You're donuts.
I think that there is an account for food somewhere.
Is that bank service charge? That's the, assuming they got DMV there, the 3% that they pick up for people paying online.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. Yeah, I think it's the,
Yeah, we gotta.
Just on that, riffing on that a little bit, do we know what our percentage of what we have to pay our credit card fees? What percentage that is? And I know it can depend on different cards, but do you have an aggregate amount?
we have a purchasing card program. We have 1,000 employees. I'm sorry. I'm gonna take that back.
Yeah.
I don't think it's 1,000. I think it's two. Okay, I'm not gonna say how many, but we have a large purchasing card program. I believe it's debit cards, not credit cards. So I'd have to get back to you on whether we have
Not
credit
necessary.
cards.
But those are for employee use. Employee
Yeah.
use, what you're saying, and maybe I'm in the wrong budget, maybe DMV, you pay by credit card, that type of thing, and there's fees associated with that. That's what this,
Yeah.
We're talking about, yes,
That's
when
what
we pay by credit card online,
Yeah.
we are absorbing $4.7 million in fees in 2024 by allowing.
When other.
When they buy their, pay for their license and whatnot, by not charging them.
Yeah.
And that's something that has been discussed. I mean.
That's gonna go up and up.
That's gonna.
Oh, yeah, there's no online.
Beyond, and so, you know, everybody- you see all these vendors, people changing to say you're gonna pay 2% or whatever, or 3%, some number for using a credit card, but.
That was the topic last year and I
It
think it
didn't-
will
I don't know
continue
how
to be
far it
as
went.
more and more people use credit cards.
That number.
It's not unusual nowadays to have a fee associated when you use a credit card.
Right.
And,
Yeah.
Although
I don't know
this
why we're
doesn't-
not doing that.
That may or may not be the right line because it doesn't
Yeah.
anticipate, well, it does a $300,000, maybe not as fast, 1.7 to 2 point, you know.
yeah, that's $2 million.
I heard some pavers might be able to use that.
Yeah.
I'm wondering.
Either
on
give
page
us a third of the
33, I'm
line
just
or-
looking at some of the numbers and just want to make sure I'm reading this correctly. So
Cool.
when I look at health insurance for classified employees, it was $21 million in 2024. And we're looking at a proposed budget of 29 million. So there's a 10, almost 11% increase. And that is all, is it collective bargaining or is there a?
Yeah, so
I mean, that's.
it is driven by the collective bargaining agreement. However, the actuals don't reflect the vacancy turnover savings. So if you look just a few lines up, representative for the code that says vacancy turnover savings. So we budget an amount each year that we expect in vacancy. When the actuals come in, we don't, associate any savings to that code. So I would say, there's a portion of what we're expecting in vacancy savings that would be related to health benefits, right? Because it's a part of the position cost. So that is going to account for, I'm not going to throw a number out there, but it's going to account for a bit of the delta between the 21 and the 29. But on average, salaries increased by 6.4%, retirement increased by 7%, and health insurance increased by 16% since last year.
It's real world.
And the retirement is also part of that collective bargaining.
Retirement is not. Retirement is set by finance and management and the treasurer's office.
Okay. So we're looking at just the governor's recommended budget of $26.4 million for retirement. Am I reading that correctly?
Yeah, yes.
Thank you.
And, so on the retirement, are those actually payouts to employees or is that going into the retirement fund? Then the treasurer takes care of
The second.
the actual pay.
The second,
Yeah.
the second one that you said.
Yeah.
Representative, yeah. It goes into the retirement fund. The treasurer's office is responsible for making the payments on retirement for.
So that's like 401k.
Yes, but I would want to defer to finance and management of the treasurer's office. I know that we have a PAYGO system and they set the amount that we need to be contributing to our retirement accounts each year.
Right.
Jim Casey, Hubbardton, I'll tell you what, the salaries are impressive.
Yeah, for
You
sure.
guys all do well.
We all go work for research.
I think so.
Right.
1,293 people.
Yes.
Yeah.
It would be nice if they didn't keep making new positions. That'd be kind of nice. We're sitting here wondering, we're just talking about mileages that we're trying to pave. It's like, wow, it's a lot of money there. Lots of it, big money. There's there's pages of them.
Our-
I'm jealous. I gotta admit, I'm jealous. Huh?
This,
We're eliminating 14 in DMV, so.
this budget contains 14 positions that we're proposing to eliminate in DMV, 2 in highways, and 1 in finance and administration. And that's not called out as a separate line item. It's all included within the account codes that make up, where those position salaries and benefits hit. But we know how much those positions cost. So if you were, interested in knowing exactly how much is reduced by division, we can. Yeah.
I found Representative Couch's donut line. And it's been cut back dramatically.
I'm glad to see it.
Page
We're at
200.
a wellness campaign.
I will say I have a team of 9 wonderful budget analysts that work with the divisions to create this budget book at this level of account detail. So while I can use my computer to tell you the numbers, if you actually had a question of, why did donuts go down in highways, I would be, typing to my team to figure out why that decision was made. But none of this would be possible without the support of the greater finance team.
Yeah, we were wondering if you.
No, it's not a one-woman show.
I think that it provides an opportunity for those that are particularly numbers driven or spreadsheet driven, or they want to they can do that on their own piece of digging into it. Well, we haven't dug into this at the level in the short time I've been on the committee, so that doesn't mean it wasn't available to me, but different view from this side.
There's quite an assortment. I mean, yes, ammunition, because we have, DMV law enforcement, right? I mean, it's work boots, just everything's there.
It's a lot of, if you like detail, you now know where you can spend a heck of a lot of time on detail. And inside your group, they also have, of course, was it 442 buildings and transportation buildings? And
Yes, there's.
somebody's put a bill in that says you need to review them all and see what is available for potential other uses.
Interesting.
I'm not saying it's gonna pass, it's not in our committee, but I've heard of a bill that's been put in to review all state buildings for potential vacancy and other potential other purposes, repurposing. And since you have 400, and I think I heard 442 of them at one point.
I think that was, it's not me who testifies to that, but I think I was in the room. So yes.
But eventually all that stuff, piling all those numbers together and bringing all in piece does eventually come through your team of 9, right? You have to pull it all together to be into this. Wow.
And our
Look like you have a
building,
question, brewing?
No,
Okay.
I'm just an avid listener today.
2 questions. One, does federal government come in and audit?
yes.
Yeah.
Yes, we have an internal audit team. We have our external auditors that conduct the single audit. That's currently CLA accounting firm. And then FHWA does do audits of our division staff. And our internal audit team works with the divisions to make sure they're prepared to respond to those inquiries.
That's question number one. Then question number two, then not picking on things, but like I noticed food and different things like that in 2024 were very high, and I'm guessing it was during the flood when people were like,
Yes.
you gotta go stay in a motel and, you know, all of that.
Yes.
And that would be recoverable from FEMA.
We,
Some of that.
we received a lot of waivers on administrative expenses during both the 23 flood and the 24 flood, just to have boots on the ground immediately. Not all of it is recoverable. We are continuing to negotiate with FHWA on what meets their standard for documentation. So it is a learning process if we were to, you know, go through a future flood, that even though we documented waivers of what was needed to get the work done immediately, we may not be able, I mean, we'll see, but we may not be able to move as fast as we did for the past two floods, because we have to be more focused on documentation to recover costs.
I am just focusing on page 292 and just looking at your advertising budget. And
Sorry, what page was that represent?
it's 292. And I just want to make sure I'm reading this correctly. So in the proposed budget this year, there's $3,500 for radio advertising, 39,000 for print, and 0 for web. And is that the budget for the entire Agency of Transportation?
Yeah, this report is AOT wide.
Okay. Those numbers are surprising to me, particularly web advertising, which has $0. And I say that because we had testimony this week on V-Transparency, and I thought, oh, that's a funny term. I thought Chair Walker was making that up, but I learned that there's actually a website called V-Transparency, which just made me think there's so much work that your agency puts in, so many people dedicated to this. And I thought, wow, that I didn't even know there was a whole website that shares all this great information for the public. I'm just wondering how many other members of the public don't realize the information that's available to them. So
yeah,
I guess my comment is that web advertising at $0 seems, I would think maybe shifting some print to web so that Front Porch Forum or some of these pretty affordable ways to get public information out would be a great way to let the public know about the great resources that are available to them regarding, you know, road conditions, storm conditions, et cetera.
Yes,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I imagine that if I dug into this with my accounting team, we'd actually find that there were web invoices that hit the advertising print line. And sometimes it's just that we've never used that account code. So
Right.
when my team is coding, they're used to, you know, hitting this one advertising account code, which they know as advertising. But, you know, the chart of accounts does have more detail saying, okay, no, that's advertising print.
Right. Is there in this book, if I wanted to go down that rabbit hole and find out?
No, if
That's the extent of the detail.
this is
Yeah.
the extent of the detail. If you wanted us to find out whether any of the expenses that we incurred in 24 were really web advertising, like that's something that my team would do and get back to you.
Okay, I mean, no rush, I just would be curious because as I said, I think there's great information out there, but I'm unsure how much of the public is aware of that.
Okay, well, Candace, I really appreciate you coming in and walking us through and giving us a whole lot of more. I hope we didn't create a whole lot of more questions and work in your way, but it is a wealth of detail and information. And it's Friday at noon, and we are going to be adjourned shortly for the week. Next week, there is sort of T-bill language review and testimony on Tuesday. Also mileage-based user fee, which we'd heard from testimony last week that is not likely to be in the transportation bill this year, so, but we are going to continue to get the details because there are expectations around this building that we were moving forward this year, so we need to be prepared to answer those questions about how we can't and why and what that's going to impact to our potential revenue discussion that we've been having all the way through on where are we going to find or keep more of our own transportation revenue. There's a whole accountability day around all of the T-bill review of the last 2 years of what the agency's been asked to do and report on. So they have a huge list of things we've asked them to do, and they include oral reports, they include written reports and reviews. So there's a whole, we will have a lot of shifting in and out next week. When you can think of one of the day, Wednesday, Thursday, we very much kind of accountability piece that's going to go through all next week of things we've asked them to do that they now have to come back and tell us that they did them and what they did or didn't do. There's also some active transportation piece on some more on the rail trail, more on the South Burlington Trail, on a whole bunch of things that have been asked for. But all of next week is a whole lot of in and out and report and whatnot for all of, and next week is going to be filled with visitors in and out, all on accountability and on active transportation. And there's also a stormwater section. So that's what you're looking forward to next week.
That get posted soon?
We're not quite ready, but we're getting close.
Okay. I'm trying to schedule schedule a meeting during committee time.
And then we-
I want to meet.
I can
Sure.
talk to you after.
Yeah.
And we have there's also a joint session that we had to work in there to make some adjustments, but
Yeah.
go ahead and we are